So today we are just going to kind of really dive deep into what it means for brands to collaborate and how that's kind of becoming more and more of a thing. Also, I don't want to sit here and talk to you the whole time, so feel free to use the live chat and I will pay attention to those questions as we go along. So let's get into it. So the first thing you're going to have to do is I really want you to think for a second. What is a brand collaboration that's either iconic, it could have been done 20 plus years ago, or a recent brand collaboration, and throw it in the chat. I'll start it off. So my favorite one I've seen actually happened last summer, and it was between Elf Cosmetics and Chipotle. And Elf came out with this entire line, but the main focus was on the eye palette. And that eye palette looked just like Chipotle's trays do when you're going through the line to pick up your tomatoes and your meats and all that. And you would think, how's that going to go in my face? Well, it actually turned out being really awesome. They used TikTok and drag queens, and they were able to do these giveaways because they had very similar target audiences. And so it became very fruitful. Also, go Cox. I see that in the chat. And Stranger Things and MAC Cosmetics, we're actually going to talk about in a little bit. So I'm glad you know about that one. Disney and Ray-Ban is another good one. And Ray-Ban is actually what you call a canvas collaborator. We'll get into that in a few minutes as well. And they basically collaborate with influencers and other brands on a regular basis. And so they do this over and over and over again, which is establishing this longer and longer kind of brand like execution, but also it's connecting all these brands together. So anyone they've worked with before, they're going to be able to attach to future brands. I see lots of awesome ones. We're also going to talk about the Doritos and Taco Bell one. Y'all, smarties. I knew it. I knew y'all already knew this. So let's get into it. What are we going to talk about? So we're going to kind of identify what these businesses are partaking in, so you're able to kind of critique that in the classroom with your students. We're going to talk about what these pros and cons are. A lot of these benefits actually end up also being downfalls. It all depends on how they strategize and how the brands themselves approach things. And then we're going to talk about how you can be creative and engaging using social outlets, because brand collaboration as a whole is very innovative and it's very kind of pushing that envelope of the original normal kind of way of advertising. And so why would you be boring with the way you communicate it to your publics? You don't want to be. That's not going to be successful. So we're going to talk about those things. And I kind of just wanted to point out in 2022, we did see this insane increase in brand collaborations. And a lot of people think that has a lot to do with COVID. It's kind of everyone was inside and now people are getting back outside. And so these brands are trying to find new and interesting ways to stand out because everyone's just trying to attach to everything since they're back in person. And so something that actually happened last month was Baskin & Robbins and Stranger Things, which collabed on this Sunday. And it talks about the upside down because all the toppings are on the bottom instead of on the top. Upside down. That's not how Sunday comes. And it was to talk about their new series that launched, I think, on like July 2nd or something. But they saw a major increase in viewing on Netflix end because there was the Sunday happening. And when people would go talk about watching the show, they would then go to Baskin & Robbins and make a TikTok of them eating the sundae while watching the new series. So it became kind of this trend on socials that happened organically by people that were just interested in each of the products. So what even is brand collaboration? Well, brand collaboration is not a new concept. It's been happening for quite a long time, but it's naturally just when two or more brands or companies partner together and they're promoting this campaign. And it's this campaign that's going to mutually benefit both brands if it's done correctly. And it's normally surrounding a product or a service, but it can also take place in many different types of forms. So one way is a simple celebrity endorsement. This endorsement by Justin Bieber, literally just posting a picture of his Crocs in his pool on Instagram, led to a 13-year spike, the highest spike Crocs has ever had in 13 years to their shares in just one night. Another being product placement. We see this a lot in movies. We see this a lot in shows. But there's only been one time that the same brand has happened twice in the same kind of realm of movies, and that would be with Tom Cruise and Top Gun. So back in 1986, the Ray-Ban 3025 aviators, which you see him wearing in both of these pictures, had a spike in their sales. And then again this year, they were actually put on back order because their sales went through the roof and they were not expecting it to happen again since it had already happened in the original. Next, you kind of have the idea of co-created products. These are honestly my favorite because they get a little wild and you can do it in multiple different ways. It's when you don't have to be related. So like one not related would be Goff LaFleur, which is a golf company, and Ginny's Ice Cream, which is an ice cream company. They came together and they wanted to create what it was like to be on the golf field. I don't golf, out there on the course, and make that taste come to your mouth. And so they created snowflake ice cream, and it was supposed to remind you of kind of the green mint, and white chocolate was supposed to remind you of the golf course. Balls being the white chocolate when you hit the golf balls on the grass. And then Frito-Lay and Taco Bell, which someone brought up, a lot of people have brought up in the chat now, they first partnered, which is two food brands, so it makes perfect sense for them to partner together and create their own food product, which they have done actually multiple times. They came out with the original, and then they came out with the blue bag, and then they came out with spicy, and then they did the hot Cheeto. They just keep going with it and keep going with it. And they have also even partnered with the SEC a couple of years ago to where anytime someone kicked a field goal for their team, that student's team was able to go get free Doritos Loco Tacos. And during the playoffs that year, they also sponsored all the student sections. I actually was at one of the games when that happened, when Auburn played in the Sugar Bowl, and we got all of this Taco Bell and Doritos gear. I tried to find it. I couldn't find it for y'all today, or I would totally be sporting it. And the other way that we're seeing this mainly with influencers, but it can happen across brands, is a full product line. And this actually launched last week. And it's Remy and Revolve. If you know anything about Remy, she's a famous TikToker now, but she is kind of coming to this world supporting the idea that brands are not inclusive with their sizing and no one's calling them out. So she's kind of using her influence and her following to be able to call those people out and kind of follow through on making it more inclusive. And so this is able to help in multiple different ways. It's able to help because Revolve is getting to prove that they're trying to make change in the social forum, and Remy is also staying true to her authenticity and following through with her commitment to inclusivity to her audience. So it's strengthening both of their bonds with this said target audience. So what are these pros to brands collaborating? These collaborations really do offer the opportunity to navigate through the outside usual traditional brand activity. So when you think of a brand coming out with a new product, you think of Maybelline coming out with a new lip gloss. There's nothing special about this lip gloss. It's just in a different package. It's probably the exact same color because it's a clear, sparkly gloss that they've made 100 times. So this is not unique. This is nothing interesting to grab their attention. It's just different packaging. So you have to try really hard to think outside the box to make that innovative and to make people want to buy that. This is when brand collaborations can step in. They could easily connect with an influencer or another makeup brand or even a McDonald's and create it to be the fry flavor or the barbecue sauce flavor, which Elf actually does that quite frequently. So it's out there if you need to have an interesting example to bring up in class. But what makes these so successful? So these are successful when brands really do have that high positive impact, and it's going to show through their sales and their stock. But not only through that, it's going to be an increase immediately. So if something is popular or something becomes trending and innovative to the audiences, and you're actually reaching that target audience you would like to reach, you're going to see it instantly. But you also, on both brand sides, should have a continued engagement and a continued new following, new customers, new sales over a period of time. And so the impact is fully focused on that return on investment. What does that look like and who is it for? So this is going to be with a positive increase in followers, engagement, media publicity, and it is a way for established companies to actually deepen their relationships with the customers that they already have and that buy from them frequently. This is showing that they're not sticking to their traditional ways and they're wanting to find new ways to connect with the audience, even if they're new customers or old customers, and new ways to kind of bring other people into an established sense. From here, you're kind of able to see that another brand collaborating with one brand is going to lead to this kind of access to a new audience. Through that, you're able to then see that how frequently people have been using these brand collaborations is why people continue to use it. Though it was not called brand collaboration 10 years ago, it was just brands partnering with other brands. And it might have not have been as quirky back then either. It's something that's very important. And so with this, you also have the power of the network effect. And so the network effect is when brand one collaborates with brand two, but then brand two collaborates with brand three. Well, that makes all three of these brands attached to one another in one way or another, especially if they have very similar target audiences. So the customers from brand three is going to remember brand one partnering with this mutual brand they have in common in brand two. From there, they're able to kind of continue to grow. So that brings us to Canvas collaborators. Good example of this is Smeg. Smeg has been a Canvas collaborator religiously because in the last year, they have partnered with Dolce & Gabbana, Disney, and Fiat. We're able to see that you can very instantly see what brand was represented in each of these kitchen appliances. And through that, you're able to see that it is successful because it's not just elevating one brand, it's elevating both of the brands. It's bringing something new to the aspect and something new to kind of the concentration. Also, a lot of these collaborations start with the idea of respect. We saw this with Fendi and Skims. They both kind of had mutual respect that game recognizes game and kind of the idea of trendy businesses that were happening. And so when this happens, it's building trust with their brand, but also their brand as collaborators now. And through this, you're able to promote it two different ways. So brands are really being rewarded by being seen as this new prestige, upper level, kind of elevated way because they're pushing these boundaries, they're working with like-minded brands, and they're being innovative. But those can also all be your downfalls. And so on the flip side of this, the benefits are an idea of how quickly collaborations can also turn into a failure. And so through this, the biggest one that we see is when brands' values just do not align. And it's normally very obvious that they do not align. An example of this would be the Shell and Legos picture that you see in the kind of center. They had a partnership for over 50 years, and Shell was giving a large amount of money towards Lego to be able to make these Shell-inspired Legos for kids to play with. It was extremely strategic on Lego's side, and they were becoming very profitable from it, but also not having to put out that much of their own money. But it turned sour very quickly when the majority of the public outcry using social media and a organization called Greenpeace started campaigning against this partnership because this partnership was very public. It's not something that you could have avoided. And from there, they found out that the partnership should end because kids and toys is connected to innocence. But Shell was being exploited more and more and more for all these shady environmental tactics that they were using and practices to kind of cut costs and cut corners. So through this, it was showing, and Lego even admitted to it, that it contradicted to everything that they stood for, and it was just time for the partnership to come to an end. Some people were happy that it was just dissipated and there was nothing else to kind of focus on, but others wanted them to have a little bit more impact. They wanted them to take action towards Shell and kind of keep them accountable. That's not something we saw. But don't you worry, the public and Greenpeace kept on Shell, and there actually ended up being plenty of lawsuits to follow. Another way that it can lead to downfalls is poorly defined agreements and expectations. So one brand can come in and kind of introduce themselves to another brand, pitch an idea of a collaboration, and have completely different thoughts about how it should be approached. Completely different ideas of the way that they should communicate this, or the way that the product or service should be marketed, but also how it should be made. People always have different warehouse choices or money choices or materials choices, especially when it comes to products. And so through this, if it's not clearly defined and if it's rushed, it's going to continue to fail and fail and fail until the relationship is just ended, or it just never gets off the ground running to begin with for the public to know about. But one good example of this is actually Kraft and Starbucks. So back in 2010, their 12-year partnership ended, and it was because each brand was actually accusing the other brand of not keeping up with their not keeping up with their end of the bargain, their end of the contract that they had signed 12 years prior. It was because the contract had never been updated and it also wasn't regularly being checked. So Starbucks was going to the public and complaining about Kraft, and Kraft was doing the exact same thing. So it was bringing a lot of negative attention to each of the brands. So this negatively affected Starbucks's brand equity, and it also costed Kraft more money than they even got out of the partnership for a 12-year term. They ended up losing $500,000 and they only made $50,000 from the investment. So as trends continue to kind of collaborate more and more and more, and it's becoming more popular, we do see that these brands are rushing. And so the first speaker today, she talked about Pepsi and Kendall Jenner's commercial. Also, a very poorly timed because it was around the Black Lives Matter movements, but also poor quality. So months later, the Keeping Up with the Kardashians season aired, and you literally saw her mother, Kris Jenner, take the phone call, and within 2 days, Kendall was shooting the commercial, and it was up. It was up for 36 hours on YouTube, and it only ran for one commercial cycle. They quickly knew from the outcry on social media and the immediate kind of, I think it was like 13% in 1 hour decrease of their shares, and the issues that brought up in the stocks. So they knew that they had made a mistake. And so this is normally because of research, which is a very vital part, but also just due diligence. You have to be extremely thorough, not just in choosing the brand you're going to collaborate with, but also the idea of the collaboration itself and if it even makes sense. The commercial, it was her leading a protest of mainly white people and didn't have a very diverse or inclusive kind of reach for the image itself. And she approaches a cop and hands them a Pepsi and opens it, and they like clink, and everyone is like so happy and all is well in the world, when that's not what was happening in the real world at the time, and that was not going to change anyone's mind. So there was no one that agreed with it. And it was just a very, very bad example of a project not being well thought out, not being researched, and someone not having a diverse audience probably in the room around the marketers and advertisers. So lastly, poor execution on one brand side or even on both brand side can be the downfall. It is so vital if you're going to choose something as creative as a brand collaboration for you to make sure that on either end of this, you're using communication tactics that reflect that you're creative and innovative. And that still stays true to both brands' kind of idea and quality. Like the Smeg ones, how you could see that each of them really represented each of the brands individually. You still see that it's Smeg, but you still connect it with each of the brands. That's extremely important for how a brand is viewed. You want to stay authentic. You also want to make sure that as a visual standpoint of your, just like someone's personal brand, that it's staying the same throughout your company brand. And so with this, there has to be equal effort on both sides. And normally that should be always written into the contract. So I did actually do a classroom assignment last year around this topic, which we can talk about some more examples that I just didn't want us to run out of time. So I kind of skipped through my notes. But what I did with this, it was a team project, which I know students don't like team projects, but students actually really liked this one. I normally get and by the end they were like, I really liked this. And I was like, oh, okay, well, good. And so basically I had a class where I was able to make 8 different groups and 2 people were in each group, but 2 groups were going to work together. So it was actually teams of 4. And so these 2 groups would choose the 2 brands that they wanted to collaborate on, insert idea that they came up with. And each of the groups, so 2 people represented one brand and 2 people represented the other brand. And they had to go through the steps of planning, designing, and strategizing what the implementation of this brand collaboration they had came up with was going to be. And that took about a day and a half. And then after that, they were able to proofread each other's projects, kind of like their proposals, I called them, and the whole class read everyone. So I also went through them to make sure like everyone did as they should have or included everything they should have, kind of just a double check for them to feel confident about sharing it with the whole class. And of course, met with people if they had questions. And then from there, I put it on Blackboard for everyone to see. And so the class then had to do the research part for each of these brands. And they had about a week to do this. So there was time for them to make sure that they had the understanding of what they were looking for and also the understanding of the brands. If it was like someone that doesn't ever wear makeup, but this person chose a makeup brand, or someone that's vegan and has never ate meat, which Beyond Meat, another Canvas collaborator that has collaborated with almost every American nationwide fast food chain, actually. And they've done a very good job. So that would also be another good example. But then the two groups would come up together and they would present their collaboration to the rest of the class. And they would the class would then ask them questions. So they're trying to make sure that there's no holes, or if they had found a hole from reading the proposal itself through their research, they could then bring it up as a discussion point, like, oh, but what about insert something that the values don't align with? And from this, we were able to really kind of learn how people research, but we were also able to learn what type of leader you are in a group, and also what type of person you are in a creative brainstorming session. Every time I've worked in an agency, sitting down at that creative roundtable and bringing ideas and bringing proposals and bringing communication strategies can be a little daunting. So anytime I can kind of bring that into the classroom, I try to, because sometimes people don't have internships that allow them to do that. But it was very well received, and it was not an ungraded assignment. It was very much graded for strategy and graded for classroom participation and evaluation, but it wasn't like it was a low hanging fruit kind of assignment, because it did push them out of their comfort zones, because this was sophomores doing this, first semester sophomores normally in their majors. So I didn't want to overwhelm them. So let's kind of wrap all this up. So the best thing that a brand can do if they're thinking about doing a collaboration is these 4 bullet points. Stay authentic to its mission, align its values with brand collaborators and who that person is, one brand, multiple brands, influencers, celebrities, etc. Do the needed research, implementation, and evaluation throughout to achieve success, and to also know when to shift the strategy through the evaluation stage. If you have ever taught PR classes, you know that you have to evaluate the entire time a campaign is going on. This is no different when it comes to brand collaborations. And then really at the end, set expectations from the start. If one brand proposes it to another brand, they need to come with a full plan, kind of in action. And my students learned that very quickly when they were trying to choose which brand should go together. It wasn't even if they aligned, it was, does this even make sense? Because we would want it to be a food item and you want it to be a clothing item. And so from there, thank you. Let's open it up to Q&A. I know I saw a few questions at the end. And also feel free to connect with me on socials. I'm at the Kate Stewart everywhere, even on LinkedIn, so I'm very easy to find. And we can brainstorm always some more new, exciting kind of ideas